Coming to you from a redwood forest in California, I'm Flint Del Sol,
And I'm Xilo del Sol.
and welcome to the Great Trans-American Road Trip. We are trans husbands who decided to leave our roots behind to become permanent nomads, traveling the country in search of community, safety, and belonging. In this podcast, we'll regale you with tales from the road, offer insight gleaned from our experiences, and occasionally chat with the friends we make along the way. Today, we're talking about mushrooms, specifically the magic kind. I was raised, I know, in the same way that you were, in like the D.A.R.E generation, where you would get packed into an auditorium once a year. When did they start those? I felt like fourth grade, right? Like fourth, fifth grade. And like a fireman would come and there'd be a coloring pages telling you how drugs were bad. And there's a whole week dedicated to it, right? They gave you a wristband that kids would modify with Sharpie. And it was sort of presented to me that everything that could have been considered a drug was in the exact same category. That all of these were equally dangerous. They would all equally destroy your lives if you tried them once. There was like the category of alcohol was one thing and that was okay. And then all of these other things were drugs and they were all not okay. Is that accurate? Is that what your life was like too?
Yeah, they made us really scared of it.
My relationship to it, I think, is also complicated by the fact that my mother had really severe substance abuse issues. This is something that's really challenging to talk about, so I'm going to do my best to give the amount of detail that I'm comfortable with, which is that my mom had pretty severe alcohol issues when I was growing up from the moment that I can remember her, up until she died when I was in high school. She died homeless in Los Angeles, in part due to her issues with substances. But that didn't spring out of nowhere, right? It's not like my mother was born into substance abuse. It was something that came out from her not getting the kind of support that she needed, with specifically like her lifetime of abuse that she suffered from her family, and then her mental health struggles as she had me, right? I was a baby that she had after several miscarriages, and I was the only one in my family. And so she really struggled for a very long time. And I made a decision after she passed, right, when I was in late high school, that I was never going to touch any substance. So alcohol, marijuana, none of it, because I was sure that that was the reason why she struggled. And I still, right, neither of us drink. We don't drink alcohol. Why do you think that is? The two of us don't drink.
It doesn't feel good, and we have alternatives. The way that some people use alcohol to relieve anxiety, we've found in plant medicine.
Yeah. I think this is a generational thing too. We're seeing fewer and fewer people who are using alcohol. I have lots of feelings about alcohol in general, right? Not just because of my mom, but I spent some time working for a cancer nonprofit and was really, I guess, shocked to find out how many cancers are linked to alcohol use. And it's just, it's not great for your body, right? And I think that mushrooms were something that, because we're going to talk about weed again. So we're leaving weed here for now. We're going to come back to marijuana another time. We're focusing in on mushrooms today because this was one that was really scary for me, right? Weed was easier because I think that was something that I saw a lot of my friends using, and it was something that really quickly turned out that D.A.R.E was lying about marijuana, that I wasn't going to suddenly become like a lazy, non-contributing member of society and end up in a basement doing nothing. Like that was very clearly not true. Mushrooms, psychedelics in general, were something that I had a lot less experience with. Do you remember your first time using or seeing mushrooms like in the world?
I was really introduced to mushrooms by my sister and an ex-girlfriend. My sister been studying and journeying with plant medicine. She's a couple years younger than me for a long time, right? In her early 20s, or even younger. She started traveling to pursue indigenous leaders that could teach her about plant medicine. That was my first introduction to it, was understanding mushrooms as sacred tools that have been used far longer than what research has documented by indigenous people. And that is really what drew me to it as a spiritual practice. But because of all the messages that I've gotten that it's bad, in order to really try it for myself, I needed to also understand the science.
Yeah.
And my ex-girlfriend was in psychedelic sciences. She studied psychedelics in a variety of contexts through major universities. And so something about understanding how it can be used to heal eating disorders and depression and trauma really, really intrigued me. We have tons of data and research that this is something that is really transformative for people. And then I had to gather as much information as possible on everything bad that could happen and understand it and how to understand how to control it in order to try it. Like my anxiety was like, I must know everything. I must know exactly how to curate the perfect set and setting in order to go on this journey and experience. I had to ask a lot of people what it felt like and understand that there is going to be a come up, right? A period of anxiety that happens as these medicines integrate into your system. And I need to know about that. And there's no way I could have ever possibly understood it until I tried it.
That's the thing that's always so frustrating about trying to explain. It's kind of like trying to get somebody invested in a story about your dreams, right? Like when you're explaining a mushroom trip or you're explaining the way in which plant medicine has altered your life. You're talking to someone who like doesn't speak the same language as you yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. Trying to explain how dreams work to someone who's never had a dream.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a phrase I use a lot, which is trying to get someone to open a door that they don't even see, right? That I feel that way a lot about looking at myself pre and post mushrooms, because I think people find their way to mushrooms usually in a moment either like of crisis. Like you usually don't try something this new and this scary unless you have a reason to.
Right. And they're not your typical party drugs, which is, I think, how so many things are classified.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I think people tend to encounter them, out camping with their friends around a fire. They encounter them because they're curious or they're really just open to new experiences. And so many people are searching for healing with them. Some people still are looking to use them to escape.
Mushrooms are definitely not something you should use to escape. And that's something, right? Like when you categorize something as a party drug or you think of it as a party drug, because I think people do, right? They talk about taking mushrooms and then going to, a rave, or they're going to go to a house party and they're going to do mushrooms with people. There's a real danger in taking something before you really understand what it's supposed to be used for. I think you had talked about your sister first coming to mushrooms as something to understand herself spiritually, right? As a medicine. And I think that there's a lot that mushrooms have to offer if you do think of them that way. That was something that kept me from them for a long time, as I thought of them in the same category as, all these other cocaine, right? And ketamine and MDMA, which, we have opinions about all of these things separately. I thought of them as something that you did and then you went partying and then you came home and then there was like a hangover period or whatever. And I had no idea what they would do to my body or to my system. And so there's a lot of anxiety around them, right? I encountered mushrooms for the first time at someone's 30th birthday Joshua Tree retreat. Joshua Tree is one of those places in California that's very popular for mushrooms. The desert is in general, I think. And I didn't do it then. I watched as all these other people took mushrooms and I hung out as I watched their experience. And I think that was the first thing I needed. I needed to watch somebody else experience it. And then I had a mentor who we were hiking through Catalina, which is, I still think, one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And it's a very safe feeling place because it's an island. There aren't any natural predators on Catalina Island. I still didn't do it even then. I thought about it and I didn't, but it was important to watch a safe person who I trusted about everything else in her life who recommended them to me. And it wasn't until I was with you and you had, right, not only the spiritual side, you also had that research that you've done for yourself that convinced me this was something that could actually be helpful for me.
Yeah, when it's something you've experienced so much healing from, it's something you just want to gift to people.
Yeah.
And people that you really care about, you want to lead them through the transformations they can bring. And it's also important to note that we are not sharing this for the purpose of advising individuals listening to this podcast on what drugs they should take.
Yeah, that's a huge, important, like big ol' asterisk, right? We are not doctors. We're definitely not your doctor. And your experiences are yours. This is not us recommending it to you. The reason why we're talking about it today on a podcast called The Great Trans-American Road Trip is that one of the reasons we're here right now is because of our experience with mushrooms. And it'd be disingenuous for us to week after week talk about our decisions and to talk about our journeys and to not mention psychedelics. They're a big part of the decisions that we make and our return to understanding ourselves.
Yeah, I've been chomping at the bit to produce this episode because every other episode before it, I feel like what's underneath all my understandings of myself and how I regulate and how I operate in the world and support my clients comes from key knowings and understandings and intuitions that I've gotten because of my use of plant medicine. And so it is so important that we talk about it. And also, we are in beautiful Humboldt County, California, which is one of the meccas of mushrooms,
Yeah.
magic mushrooms, and marijuana. And we design our life to give ourselves time to rest and be in nature and have experiences with plant medicine. And that's a really important part of our lives. That's part of why we're here.
Can we then start with what a mushroom trip feels like? Because this is something, right, that I think was huge for me, was hearing from people who talked about their experiences when I decided whether or not this was something I wanted to do.
Yeah. Do you want to start?
Ooh, okay. I think what's fascinating about mushrooms is if you talk to people about whether or not they take them, there are some people who tried and then never did again because of what it does to your gut, right? Your stomach. And so mushrooms has a pretty big effect on your tummy.
Yes, because that is where serotonin is
That's where
released.
serotonin is released. And so when I take a full dose of mushrooms, right, which what is it? It's like is it 4 milligrams?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Okay. So between like 4 and 6, right? If I'm in that world, take a full dose of mushrooms. There's always the long period that comes ahead of time where you're not sure if they've taken. Whenever we do a full dose, often it's in tea. So we'll brew it in tea, which I'll add lemon to. And at that point, right, like it's between 30 minutes and an hour before anything starts to happen at all. And then you'll experience, or I experience, what's called the come up, which is this period where you can really tell that something is happening in your body. That's when the anxiety can kick in. This is why my best experiences have always been at home, in a place where we're feeling really safe, and we've been able to curate an environment that makes it feel like we can exist without people sort of like watching, and you don't have to think about other people. So during that come up, right, I can feel a lifting. Definitely, I feel it in all of my extremities, right? So there's like almost like a buzzing, right? It's a very physical experience that come up. And
Yeah.
that's when the tummy situation kicks in. Often there's a degree of nausea, and it's easy to get really caught up in that. But I think the first lesson that I get from mushrooms is always to like trust it, to know that whatever the physical experience that I'm having is going to pass. And that's when I move into the actual trip itself.
I feel the buzzing in my mouth first,
Mm,
usually. And this is so different for everyone. And it also is so different depending on what you've already eaten and what form you're consuming mushrooms in. No two experiences are alike. But yeah, typically you feel physical heightened sensations first. And, so many people are afraid of the discomfort that comes, especially as someone who's already so sensory sensitive and just sensitive in general. So, what you mentioned about being at home and having the tools and things you need to regulate, remembering that you can't die of discomfort.
and also, I don't think you can die of mushrooms either.
No,
I spent so much time researching before I tried this for the first time. I don't think there's a documented case of someone ever.
no, you can't overdose.
No.
Okay, so there's a come up that can be really anxiety inducing, right? Most recently, we did mushrooms at the beach and we weren't at home. And so we had to bring a million things with us so we'd be comfortable. We had shelter and comfort items and snacks. And I remember being so uncomfortable, as beaches are for so many sensory sensitive people, so uncomfortable with everything being sandy and struggling to let go of control. I was like trying to not let sand get in our tent, and there was no way around it. And I usually try not to take mushrooms when I'm feeling in an anxious space like that, because mindset going into a mushroom trip is so important. But I've had enough experiences with mushrooms. I knew the discomfort would pass and that I would work through it. And then there's just, maybe an hour, 2 hours in, once you've felt kind of the buzzing and the tingling, for me, what comes is just an incredible wave of calm and peace and acceptance. And I feel more like myself than any other time in the world because all my sensory sensitivities become delightful.
Mm,
All of a sudden, the sand and the water and the trees, everything, the cool breeze, everything is joyful.
yeah.
It connects me to my inner child that found so much awe and wonder in nature.
I think that's my experience as well. If I take a full dose of mushrooms, I also experience visuals. I know that's something that's not usually part of your experience. And visuals, I think, are something that I had thought early on was hallucinations. And that's not what that is, right? A hallucination, this idea of seeing something that's not there that just pops out of nowhere, has not been what I've experienced. What I've experienced is a new way of looking at things that are already there. Colors become hugely vibrant and things move, but they move in a way that feels like breathing, right? So you feel like when you're really up close to like the sand or a tree, where you're looking up at the sky, it feels like suddenly I can see the smallest and the largest of the universe at the same time. And everything feels connected and beautiful and bright. And it doesn't feel like a screen, right? Or like seeing, it doesn't feel like seeing something that's not there. It feels like seeing something that was always there that you're finally getting a ticket into. And it's beautiful. I've had experiences with mushrooms that have been not incredible. And those have mostly been when I'm, right, we talk about mindset and setting, have been in places where I'm uncomfortable, I'm already feeling, bad or anxious. But I find that when I trust myself and I trust the place I'm in and I trust the people I'm with, the experience is really transformative. And all of a sudden, right, like metaphor feels literal. I think one of my favorite experiences was when we were living in the desert. We were in a big pool of water, and I was starting to think of myself as a net. And I realized, right, that in my life, I can either resist the things that are coming, I can dissolve into them, or I can be this third thing, right? I can be this net that allows myself to be pushed and pulled by the current around me, but still has solid structure, still exists. And I felt really content with the idea of being the net. I think something that's really fascinating about a psychedelic experience is that all of a sudden, cliches that you've heard throughout your entire life, you understand them like really for the first time, which makes it impossible to explain them to somebody else because it just feels like you're explaining the same cliche that you've heard a million times. I think the funniest version of this was sitting in a hammock and realizing that I felt the meaning of life. It's like I knew it for a long time, right? Like you can intellectually understand something that's different than feeling it. I could feel it, and I was searching for the word, right? I was letting it exist. I was trying to figure out what it was that was the meaning of life. And I was like, okay, cool. I can feel it right now. What's the word for it? The word is right there. And when it came to me, I laughed so hard that I feel like our neighbors, who were, at that point were like 400, 500 feet from us, could hear me. I laughed so hard because the meaning was love. I was like, oh, it was there the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has been telling me this since the moment I was born, but I finally felt it.
And it was so incredible to watch you experience that. Because I had had many mushroom trips where I had discovered a self love and compassion for the first time. And it's such a delight to watch someone feel it,
Hmm.
feel from their head to their toes and every single molecule of their body that they are love and that others are love. It's something I think we're moving back towards societally. So many of us understand the intellectual parts of ourselves now. We have lots of resources on neurodivergence and therapeutic concepts. And I think there's a collective move towards somatics, helping us be in our body. Because also, these experiences you're describing, we went into so therapeutically.
Hmm.
We have so many different therapeutic psychedelic playlists that we listen to, and books and mantras and rituals that we have around this because we are entering them therapeutically, which I think is the difference. Then we've also used them recreationally to see brighter lights and colors and feel nice at music shows. But I think so much of what you're talking about is the therapeutic use of psilocybin, the active ingredient in mushrooms, that when you look at it in the studies, they describe it as things like interconnectedness in connection to nature. Those are some of the things we see in how it helps people with depression, which is the first, I think, most documented use of how therapeutic use of psilocybin is helpful for people. But you're right that the use of metaphor and our ability to understand ourselves in the world in a way that we increases our capacity for discomfort,
Hmm.
right? Like a net just lets the hard things move through without taking them on.
And I think this is why some people have early, really challenging relationships with mushrooms. People who say really early on they have bad trips. And again, I will say, I'm not a doctor and I'm not your doctor, but mushrooms make it impossible to not feel. You will feel whatever it is that you're trying to not feel. And so for some people, it's too much. It's too much to feel it, or it's the discomfort is something they can't get past. If there's a feeling that they've been ignoring or trying not to process. And this is why I think that there are people who can experience mushrooms and nothing about their life changes, or they continue to be a really negative influence on the world around them. I think about how many tech bros microdose on the weekends, right? Like guys that work at the evil AI factory and do mushrooms and their whole life doesn't change. I don't think that the mushrooms themselves are magic. I think that you are magic. I think mushrooms help you understand yourself
To the level you're willing to understand yourself.
to the level you're willing to understand yourself.
There's an openness that has to happen, and it happens in stages. And while mushrooms are incredible and that you don't forget, right? Like with alcohol, you black out and you don't remember things. With mushrooms, your brain becomes more neuroplastic and things are able to rewire in a way that you remember and can make lasting change. But there are still different levels of depth that you can go with that change. I had to have several self-love trips before I was able to have some really quote unquote bad trips, which were really just the medicine pushing me to feel hard feelings
Yeah.
that I have spent decades building walls up against, because facing intense childhood trauma is fucking hard. And this is also why therapeutic preparation is so important. I am so grateful to have a therapist who's informed in therapeutic use of psychedelics. And while we don't go to a practitioner for this, and there are lots of practitioners that do psychedelic therapy, it's becoming easier to have clinical trials and such, and there's states you can go to. We both have therapists who we can go and process with. And we're also people that are dedicated to doing our own learning.
Yeah.
So I think what made it possible for me to understand and learn from quote unquote bad trips where I was just resisting a feeling and I was tense, and instead of being joyful and outside in a forest fairy, I was like stuck in bed, miserable, just waiting for it to pass. Learning strategies for working through emotional flashbacks with PTSD was so helpful for understanding those bad trips, and what helped me transform them into incredibly compassionate, powerful experiences.
You have to be willing to look inside yourself, and you have to be
Yeah.
ready for whatever it is you might find in there.
And a lot of people try to use psychedelics before they're ready, before they've done the preparative work to feel safe enough to touch on what's going to come up, what your body's going to beg you to feel and to grieve and to process.
Yeah. I think about some of those really early experiences. I think we all have journeys or things that we're working through that mushrooms can help us understand or help us piece out. For me, my early experiences were trying to recreate what my first experience was. I was coming up against a lot of truths that took me a while to figure out. And I had to go back a couple of times. And there would be months in between each of these experiences, right? Because I'm not interested in living my life and where I'm constantly tripping, right? Or constantly high. That's not where we're at. This is something that happens every once in a while. And I realized, right, I had a first really transformative, very powerful, very deep experience. And so the second time I went in, I was trying to recreate it as if I was trying to hit play on a tape that had stopped, right? I was like, okay, I had this first experience. Now I'll do it a second time and we will continue. I'll have the same thing or just the next part of it, right? In the same way that healing is not linear, neither is a discovery, right? Neither is understanding yourself. So I kept trying to chase it or elongate it, right? Trying to get it to last longer than it was going to last. A trip lasts somewhere between 4 and 6 hours. And it was on like the third or fourth time after a period of months, I realized like, oh, I can't chase this. I don't have to chase it. It's here. It's always here. This is something that I can access outside of mushrooms. I will remember. And that was when I started to learn what trusting myself and trusting my experiences really was. And this is how, for me, it comes back to transness. This is the first time we're really talking about transness and mushrooms. I think a lot of times as trans people, we're constantly looking outside of ourselves for validation that our existence is okay. That for me has been the real gift of mushrooms, is that I don't have to chase it. I don't have to look for it. That real truth in who I am has always been inside of me. There is nowhere external that I'm going to get that. And there's a reason, right, that mushrooms can often return us to a more childlike state. We knew who we were when we were kids, and who you are is outside of gender. Gender is something, right, that's imposed on us that I honestly unlearned for the first time in mushrooms, even though I was already trans, right? I knew something about myself. Mushrooms reaffirmed it for me. Like, yeah, you know who you are. No one else can tell you who you are. It's already there. You don't have to chase it, and it's here for you. I was so worried that I was going to learn something about myself on mushrooms that was going to undo my transition, right? Or was going to lead me to some truth that was going to tell me I had done something wrong, and that's not what happened. That's never what happens. It doubles down on the truth that already lives there.
Mushrooms always bring us home.
Yeah.
They remind us who we are, that we have all that we need. Mushrooms help clear all of the trauma responses I've learned, right? All the parts of self that are trying to protect me. They've been so important for my identity integration and understanding, peeling back the layers of what was handed to me and what's me. And it feels like understanding what's right there at your core
Yeah.
and let go of societal expectations and seeking validation outside of ourselves. And that's created so much more room for us to connect with each other
Yeah. Absolutely.
and with other people that know and see us.
Yeah, we can usually tell when we meet somebody if they've also been on a psychedelic journey before.
Mhm.
I'm not going to name anybody just because that's their right. That's their journey if they want to talk about their experience with psychedelics. But so many therapists that we know, right? So many people I've worked with professionally that I vibed with really early, and I was like, "There's something about you," and it's like, "Oh yeah, they've done ayahuasca, right? Or they've done LSD, like some experience with psychedelics that has helped them accept themselves more."
Yeah. Acceptance is one of the greatest gifts I've gotten from mushrooms. Acceptance of myself, of my circumstances, of my past, of the people in my life, and compassion. And like compassion that I can like feel and hold and recall.
Yeah,
Being able to visualize cradling my inner child or letting her ride on my back, as I get through hard things that are bringing up past trauma. I mean, that's why it's so incredibly helpful for trauma survivors.
and there's really not a single trans person that I think right now that exists that who's not at least a little traumatized.
Right.
And this kind of goes back to, the gifts of mushrooms. One of the big ones for me has been time. That mushrooms, one of the universal experiences with mushrooms is that time sort of doesn't exist for a while, right? You have no concept of time. Something can last for, in quote unquote objective reality is like a minute, and you've been there for what feels like hours. And things stretch, and it's like the way that time existed when you were a kid, when you were really involved in playing. I think something I told you earlier that I was explaining to someone what it was like to be on mushrooms with you, and the way that it feels, the way that it felt on the beach, 2 days ago, was that I had made a new friend at the park when I was a kid. The way that you make a friend for just a few hours, and you're exploring things together, and you might not even remember each other's names when it's done or never see each other again, but you have this deep and unexplainable intimacy and joy with another person as you're, physically exploring the outside together. That's how it feels like, or that's what it feels like to do mushrooms with you.
Yeah. It allows me to reconnect with my inner child in a way that then lets me hold and heal her. We love a beach that's got driftwood, so it looks like, walking on logs, balancing on logs. I unmask so heavily I get to like really get all the proprioceptive input I've been seeking, right? Like I climb trees and I, skip on beaches and get my toes in the water, and it feels like playing with nature.
We found a clay deposit that was naturally springing out of the side of a rock, and we got to make things out of clay. And we started to find other things that people had made out of the clay and left there that we wouldn't have seen before. It's also the gift of noticing, of seeing things that you don't see if you're just, this beach that we went to was very far away from everything else. And so there's, I don't know, like 1,000, 2,000 steps. I don't know, it felt like that. It was probably more like 100. A bunch of steps down to the beach after a hike. So it's a very, very private beach, and we stayed there all day. So we watched people come down, we watched people explore, and then go back up. Most people go down for a purpose, right? They go to take a walk, they go fishing, they go to take their dog down, and then they leave. And something about being there all day and watching all these people, we got to find things that we wouldn't have found otherwise. The things that you find when you're a kid. when you're interested in digging and exploring and looking and sitting. We found the clay deposit, we found a mini waterfall, we found a cave, we found a little figurine that someone had left and stuck a bunch of feathers in, like a lot of things. And the joy of just simple noticing. And I think that a lot of other drugs, right, drugs that are not, plant medicine, have a pretty intense come down, which is once you're done, right, once it's over, what does it feel like after that? And for me, it's always been very gentle. It's a really slow phasing out of that experience. And this is why for a long time I tried to chase it. I tried to make it last longer. But once you accept it, you're like, yep, this was here, it happened, and now it's gone. It's a very, very gentle experience. And the only really side effect for me has been, physical tiredness because I've been playing.
Yeah, the acceptance of discomfort lingers, even though now the discomfort feeling is heightened,
Yeah.
right? We're now coming off of mushrooms and we're tired and sandy and in pain because when I jumped off a log into the sand, there was a rock there. Whoops. Um, and it's okay, and we'll know we'll get through it, and our tools are more accessible. For me, my internal tools become more accessible. So all of a sudden, being in a trans ADHD traumatized body is uncomfortable like 99% of the time. All those sensations and discomforts come back, but I'm like, okay, I know what helps me. I'm going to sing my regulation song like in my head as I climb up this hill, and I'm going to take it one step at a time, and I'm just going to be right here, and I'm going to hold myself through this difficult experience. And I'm going to be right here, and I'm going to focus on this one step, and like, okay, I did it. We're going up this hill carrying all this bags of things, and I get home and I'm like, okay, I'm hungry and I really need to shower, and like old behaviors like getting snippy or shutting down and getting quiet or getting really angry that everything's so uncomfortable. All of a sudden, I have access to it feels like the neural pathway, we think of it as like a river that's been full of leaves has been cleared. And something I always knew, which was to like hold myself gently through uncomfortable experience, is suddenly easier for me to access,
Yeah.
and I can be kind and gentle with myself the way you would be with a little kid. And while I'm on mushrooms, I can visualize them so much more easily. I can visualize myself playing with my 6-year-old self and stopping to see if she needs a drink or a snack and giving her what she needs, that all of a sudden I can do from my adult self
Yeah.
in a way that's really challenging for a lot of us.
Well, I think that also goes back to how in mushrooms we accept things quicker, right? We're like, yep, I am uncomfortable right now and this will pass. This will pass. This will pass is a big one. And knowing like, yeah, I'm uncomfortable right now. I'm tired. I'm sandy. I can wash off my feet when I get home. I can make a snack. I can take a nap. I can do all the things that I need to do to take care of myself. And I can accept the discomfort that is right now. I have a quote I've been thinking about the entire time. Can I reference it?
Please.
Okay. So every once in a while I talk about Ram Dass, who, if we're not familiar with Ram Dass, he was kind of big in the hippie movement in the 60s. He wrote this book, Be Here Now, which pretty much every hippie on the planet owns a copy of. It's blue and square, and it's got this geometric design on the front with a chair in the middle. Ram Dass is credited as being kind of like the white guy who brought yoga to the United States. He's like the original Eat, Pray, Love, go to India, find yourself, and come back. And you might also know him as being one of the reasons why there were experiments with psychedelics at Harvard in the 60s. Him and Timothy Leary and Aldous Huxley, right? All these very upstanding white gentlemen who are discovering things that have been there the entire time, right? Like I think it's really critical also, if I'm going to talk about Ram Dass, I have to talk about Maria Sabina, who is sort of the mother of psilocybin in Mexico, which is where mushrooms as plant medicine really originated. And so this guy, right, Ram Dass did not discover anything. He's sort of the translator specifically for white America to learn these things. So he's written about them for us, which is really helpful for a lot of us, right? To have something that makes it a little bit more accessible for our experiences. So I have this book in front of me, and Be Here Now. And his first time taking mushrooms, he comes back to his parents' house. He's walking back home to his parents' house and decides to shovel their walkway. And it's 5 a.m. when he's shoveling their walkway. He thinks about it as being just a nice thing to do for them, right? He's like, I have this feeling right now. I think it would be nice to shovel this walkway, and he just does it. So this is now the quote. He says, wouldn't it be nice? I'll shovel the walk. So I started to shovel the walk with my parents' faces appearing in the upstairs window. Come to bed, you idiot. No one shovels snow at 5 in the morning. That's them shouting down. And I looked up at them and I heard the external voice I'd been listening to for 30 years. And inside, something said, "It's all right to shovel snow, and it's all right to be happy." And I looked up at them and I laughed and did a jig and went back to shoveling snow. And they closed the windows and looked up, and inside they were smiling too. You can see in that moment in the early morning the seeds of the breakaway, the seeds of the ability to be able to confront and even disagree with an existing institution and know and trust that inside place that says it's all right. It's something I could have never done without anxiety until that moment, until that day. That's something I think about a lot, right? Which is you're doing something that feels weird or wrong to other people, right? Like playing around on the beach, shoveling snow at 5 in the morning. And mushrooms in that moment for him were able to give him permission. Like, no, it's fine. You can trust yourself. You can do this thing that other people think is weird, and you don't have to worry about how they feel about you. You can just do the thing that makes sense to you, which is why we are here in this trailer right now, because we have been honing the ability to trust ourselves and to trust that even if other people don't understand our decisions, we can still make them. We can still make the decisions that work for us, even if it doesn't fit into other people's idea of what we should be doing. And that's transness too. Transness is no, I know who I am. I know what I need to be doing. I know that I'm not hurting anyone and actively will improve the satisfaction I have in my own life if I follow this knowing.
Mushrooms have made it so much easier for me to not self abandon.
Yeah.
They've been crucial in leaving former relationships that I was performing through,
Mm-hmm.
in making big life changes to actively take better care of myself. They've been instrumental. And they teach me over and over again that I'm going to be doing this work for the rest of my life of learning how to take care of myself, which is why I need to read another Ram Dass quote.
Ooh, yeah. Please tell me.
This one is a poem from one of his lectures, but you can also find it in many like meditation songs. Ram Dass says, "In each of us there once was a fire, and for some of us there seem as if there are only ashes now. But when we dig in the ashes we find one ember, and very gently we fan that ember. Blow on it, it gets brighter, and from that ember we rebuild the fire. The only thing that's important is that ember. That's what you and I are here to celebrate. That though we've lived our life totally involved in the world, we know that we're of the spirit. The ember gets stronger, flame starts to flicker, and pretty soon you realize that all we're going to do for eternity is sit around the fire."
I feel like with that, with so many good poems or good pieces of writing or really true statements, you find something new in it every time. And I think about that moment in the middle that where he talks about, we've been live our whole lives involved in the world, but we know, right? We have an internal knowing that we're of the spirit, that we're all part of this same shared spirit. And that's that compassion, right? I think what's so fascinating about psilocybin or about psychedelics is that you have people from all over the planet that have done it at different times of their life, come from different experiences or different ethnicities, different genders. And so many people describe the same experiences, right? They talk about the sacred geometry of seeing patterns, right? They share those visuals of understanding love in a new way, of feeling connected to other people, of realizing that we're all part of this greater spirit, of seeing that the construct of the universe is the exact same as the construct of the microscopic world. And it brings up to me this really interesting question, which is, does that mean that those things are all true in a macro sense? Or does it mean that we all have something activated in our brain that's the same, right? That we all have this thing that lives inside of us. And to me, like that question is really interesting, and the answer isn't. That like I don't actually care why I'm feeling these things.
Yeah.
Right? Like someone could come up tomorrow and the answer is that there's, some hormone or some weird thing that's triggered and there's some reason why we're all feeling this. And it doesn't matter because the result to me is that I understand people and find compassion for them and love for them faster. Even the people who are the worst to me, even people who go out of their way to not understand my experiences, who wish pain and harm on me and everybody that I love, I can find compassion for them, which is not the same as forgiveness, right? Which is not the same as just allowing them to walk all over me or to do things that hurt other people. But it means that I understand pain that I understand the hurt and the trauma that causes them to act this way. And it means that I don't take it on. It means that I don't let their experience with me hurt me in the same way that it used to. If they choose not to see me for who I am, right? Like they don't see me as a man or they don't see me as a person, I don't internalize any of it anymore.
Mushrooms have restored so much balance to our lives. And the lived experience they are describing is the most important data you could ever have. And this is why our show notes aren't going to be full of all of the scientific studies that are trying to prove why this can help our mental health. People can Google them if that will help them understand it. But learning to trust ourselves means we lean on our own understanding and experiences. People will find in the show notes are resources to help them go on their journeys. There are incredible resources for understanding therapeutic use of psychedelics and psychedelic integration. So, taking what you learn from a mushroom trip and integrating it into your life so that it has long lasting therapeutic effects. Because a lot of us don't have access to practitioners that can guide us through that, but there are incredible resources out there to understand how to dose yourself correctly. And so, those are things we will put in the show notes because they've been really helpful to us. But ultimately, it comes back to what Ram Dass said of we're here to celebrate. We're here to celebrate that we feel and see our whole complete selves and can see it in others and have embraced that we will always be learning and growing.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. It's wonderful news that we're not done cooking yet ever. And we can hold our learning selves with so much love and compassion.
You know what this really reminds me of?
Hmm.
Is that same trip where I realized that love was the answer. It was the closest that I came to what you call ego death, which is where the self kind of dissolves completely, right, into this more whole spirit, right? If we're all of the spirit, ego death is when you dissolve into it, right? Your whole physical body and your sense of self kind of vanishes. I got real close. I wouldn't say that I actually had ego death, but I felt closer than I've ever been before. And I remember the next day having therapy. And I also have a therapist who's at least educated in psychedelics. I don't know if she does psychedelic assisted therapy, but we were talking about it and I explained this experience to her. And I said, I have great news. I have achieved nirvana. Why are you laughing? I have achieved nirvana. I have escaped samsara, right? The cycle of birth and rebirth. I've escaped it. I've done it. I did it. And she was very gentle with me. And she goes, That's great. I can't wait to talk to you in a week to see if you still feel that way. Because, yeah, it is a continuous cycle. I actually had not escaped samsara. I had not done all the work forever. I had not found a way to achieve nirvana. What I had was a really important experience. It has informed the way that I move through the world now, but it's not over.
Yeah, and the metaphor of spending the rest of our lives tending to our internal fire
Yeah.
is so helpful. And we do have the core belief that everybody has an ember that can be flamed.
Yeah.
Everybody has a core self that's based in love and compassion and connection and confidence and clarity and creativity. And we believe everyone has that, and everyone's on varying levels of their journey of fanning and even being aware that they have that and then working with it.
This is why this is so different from like a religion, right? And a religion tells you to trust some figurehead, says that trust this person. This is the person that has the answers. Listen to them, follow them. It's one of the reasons I love psychedelics so much is that anybody who's ever been a person I've listened to about psychedelics has never said, follow me. They always say, follow you. You go have this experience. Go have the experience in the way that you want to have it, and then trust and follow yourself. You have the answers. You were born with them. And I think that's true.
And we need community for that as well, to have people that remind us and can help hold up mirrors and hold us in exactly where we are being enough.
I do want to make sure that I mention this because this is something as a teacher that I feel very deeply, and Ram Dass also addresses in Be Here Now. He says that before you can become nobody, you have to be somebody, meaning that this is not a ride for kids. This is not an experience for the under 21s of the world, right? Like, I very much agree with this. You have to be somebody before you can become nobody. But if we go back to the actual magic is you are only ever going to have the experience that you're ready for. And it's not going to lead you on the other side being a completely different person who's just healed now and now we're good. It's part of a lifelong process, like anything. which is why you have soulless tech bros that microdose on weekends and then go back to making awful AI chatbots on Monday, because you ultimately only have you to work with. I'm interested to know how many of our listeners have actually had experiences with psychedelics before, or how many of them are still nervous about it, or none of this is a recommendation. I love talking about psychedelics with anybody who wants to listen, but also know that individuals are going to have those individual experiences.
Yeah. And be curious about whatever's coming up for you.
And as always, to the people out there who feel like they don't have any choices and don't have anywhere they can be, we see you, we love you, and we want to come visit. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to support our work, the easiest way is to become a paid subscriber on Substack, or else donate to us directly at delsolimpact.com. You can follow along with us on our journey on Instagram and TikTok at Just Flint is Fine, and look out soon for our Great Trans-American Road Trip web series, which will be out on YouTube. And remember, when we feel like we can't be anywhere, we are still everywhere.